Hello everyone, welcome back to another edition of videos. Today I've got my recent Lichess 45-45 League game that I played on lichess.org. In this particular position I have a very interesting position here to show you. So it comes out of the two knights defense. It's a very imbalanced position. My last move was queen to f3, and this has an interesting line of pinning this pawn. So this pawn, in theory, shouldn't be able to capture this bishop as a queen can capture on a8. But funny enough, actually, this is actually still a potential line, and something I've covered in one of my recent videos I've entitled the Granada Gambit. So something you should definitely check out if you're interested in looking into that line a bit further. I think actually after queen to a8, black gets quite a lot of adequate compensation for being down in exchange. But in any case, in this particular position, as I say, there's lots of imbalances, lots of things going on. The first problem for black is obviously he is down a pawn. He's also got a very poor pawn structure, and this knight is very poorly placed in this position. With that said, you'll find very quickly that black's activity really ramps up very quickly, and I've got to be extremely careful. The first immediate challenge for me is I've got to find a way of doing something with this bishop, getting it to a better square, and also my knight on g5 isn't particularly well placed either. So a lot of complications. It's a line that's been analysed since the 16th century, and it's said to be very equal for both players. But my particular strategy in this particular game will be look to try and do swaps when I can to try and trade off pieces. So nice beginner advice for you guys, for some of the beginners who are watching this. When you're ahead of material, look to exchange pieces as soon as you can. And also, if you can try and equalise some other imbalance in the position. For example, in this particular position, I want to try and get the activity on an even level. You should do absolutely fine, and that's known as consolidating your advantage. It's something that is always something you should do in any position like this. So, in any case, what happened in the actual game? Well, bishop came to b7, and this has an interesting threat now of this potential capture, and obviously that uncovers this this threat on the queen, and I have no way of capturing this bishop as this knight nicely defends the b7 square. The only downside of this move, and actually the computer considers it a mistake in these really, again, very imbalanced positions, that any small inaccuracy will be devastating in this position. The biggest problem of it is it stops this this knight from really getting back into the game properly. One of black's potential plans in these sort of positions is he would love to play the move c5, follow it up with knights to c6, and then jump it into d4, where it becomes a really powerful piece. But in any case, I played bishop to a4, so I wanted to maintain this pin. He can't move it because obviously this king will be put into check. So in the meantime, in the short term, it's going to be very difficult for him to get his knight into the game until his king is castled. And I've also got little threats of potentially playing a3 followed by b4. So some interesting stuff there. You play queen to c7. And as I say, I now want to try and focus on getting these guys at the back out as quickly as possible. But first, I castled in a position. Always important to castle in any position that you play, because it will get your king safe and off this very dangerous central highway or the central file. He now castled long, and a very interesting decision here by him, as it now opens up the potential threat of c5, and suddenly these diagonals start to look very devastating for black. So already you can see now black's activity really starts to ramp up very quickly. The only downside of this castle's move is it's a bit of an all-in move now. This king is actually not that safe. He hasn't got particularly great adequate protection, as it's not got these, it hasn't got any pawns to sort of protect it from the front. My king, on the other hand, although a lot of black's pieces are aiming down at it, it has got some good protection with these free front pawns here. So another threat as well for me is I've always got these nice saving grace checks with queen to f4 or queen to h3 should my positions start to get a little bit hairy. In any case here, I started to try and get my pieces as active as possible. So I played knight to c3, and this has the idea of just getting my knights connected and try and get my position stabilized here. As I say, if I can get my my pieces to good squares now, up a pawn, I should do absolutely fine. In the position, he played king to b8, and I guess this had the idea of stopping me from throwing in any potential checks in. The only downside of it is, obviously, this gives me now a move to do something. So I now play d3, and again, my position is really starting to stabilize. I'm going to jump my knight back to e4, maybe play bishop to e3, and my activity is doing absolutely fine now. He now played the move rook to d4, and I thought this was quite premature. I think he had some ideas of some potential exchanges of some of my pieces, but I just feel like this just wins me a tempo in this particular game. So I gain a bit of time now with bishop to e3. He's got to do something with this rook. You know, and actually I think really the only really good square is to maybe come back and get out of this. There is one interesting line here after c5, so opening up this diagonal. I obviously can't take this rook because this queen falls. I can, if I go to queen to g3, which looks like a perfectly innocent move, he's got a lovely threat of rook to g4, now forking both my knights and my my queen here. Yeah, this is just horrible. There's also this pawn's potentially going to fall as well, so lots and lots of problems for me. I will say actually now I see it, the bishop actually defends it, so maybe that's not a threat, but certainly just the pawn and the queen, they're a lovely skewer and really crushing me in this position. So in any case, he didn't play c3, and I was very surprised not to see that move because I think that would have given him quite a lot of chances in this position. I think after c5 I would have maybe played my queen to e2, but you even hit this position, although the computer gives this position about plus 2.7 to white, you can see black gets a lot of activity. He's got some active plans of maybe getting his other bishop to d6, starting to run the pawn down. He will need to do something with this rook though, of course, as this bishop is attacking it. So as I say, I do get a game back in tempo. Meanwhile, my plan will be after the rook moves away to maybe, I don't know, back to e8, I can start swapping off loads of pieces potentially. So, in any case, in the actual game, what happened was he now played knight to g4, and I spoke to him, as I said, I had a chat with him in the analysis. He kind of wanted to go all in with this move, and there's some actually quite scary threats in this position. I've got to be really accurate in my defence. So the first problem for me is he's now threatening to capture on h2, and this comes with an additional threat of moving his e4 pawn, then creating a discovered check on my queen. So let's just say I just play a random move like a3 here. He can now capture. If king captures, he's got this move, and he is doing very well in this position. Although I can still play this actually, so maybe that's alright actually for me, even at this point. But there's some venom in this line particularly. But in any case, the problem with this, and I consider this a mistake, is now I can capture this rook. So I just capture this rook off. So I'm already consolidating my advantage. He now played knight to h2, and this obviously comes with this particular threat. with that said, I can actually still play king to h2 here, and even after this square there's a beautiful move that I can play here to save this position, because if I move my queen to, let's say, g3, you can now jump in with bishop here, and now this queen is lost. There's nothing I can do. So I've actually got a nice in between move of bishop to e5, and this is the idea. This queen is obviously under attack. He would have to capture this off, and now I can move g3, and you'll notice this bishop, the ordering of these pieces is slightly wrong. So if he does do bishop to d6, I can just swap off. There's no challenges in this position, and I've still actually got an additional threat with this knight coming here. Notice as well as that this queen is pinned to the king. So as I say, these sort of things, even though the king is castled long, he gets a lot of short-term activity, it's still actually not that safe in the square, and it helps save me in this position. So in any case, after this I decided to do something a little bit different, and I think it works just as well in this position. So I captured here on f2, waiting to take this knight off, and you can see here already I'm now threatening to capture the queen here, and I've got an additional threat of jumping into with my knight to f8 should he capture. There's not really a whole lot my opponent can do here. I think I was definitely winning in this position. I've already also got ideas of even, I think actually just this and capturing this off, consolidating my advantage. But in any case, he decided to take my bishop. I then captured his queen. There was a few exchanges, and now you can already see some problems here. His knight is hanging still. I can actually create an additional threat with my knight either coming to e6, which the computer recommends, but I was looking at knight to f7 now, hitting the rook. So here the game didn't really go on for too much longer. I captured here on h2. He now threw in the check, and I can play g3 here. I think that's absolutely fine. But I just didn't want to give him any counterplay, and potentially there's some little tricky lines with maybe h5. It's relatively harmless, but again, I don't want to give him any play in this position. I run my king back to g1, and he made a big blunder here with bishop to c8. He should have captured this knight, so I was very surprised to see this, but bear in mind here in this position he was down to about 2 minutes left, so he might have just overlooked this move. So after this I just moved my knight away, and you can see here I've got a huge edge in this position now, threatening to capture this bishop. After king captures, there's a lovely fork here. So in any case, the game didn't go on for too much longer. I slowly consolidated my position. So I moved my rook, trying to get my pieces to as active as squares as possible. Again, I'm trying to consolidate my advantage here, so if I can get any piece exchanges, I'm doing absolutely fine. This knight moved and now threatening to come to e6. Rook came to e8. I threw in the check. There was another exchange off here. I now hit this bishop. He tries to defend, but of course this now neglects the defense of c6, so I captured here, and not really much more to this position. His rook tried to get active, and after this he resigned. You can see here this rook covers this diagonal. After the king moves, which it did to c7, I captured his rook and he now resigned. So a very interesting game here. Lots and lots of tactics, lots of complications. At move 8 I had 50 minutes on the clock. By move 12 I was down to 16 minutes. So I used 35 minutes just on these 3 moves, which just kind of says it all. And as I say, you want to try, particularly in these complicated positions, it's so important to try and analyze and evaluate every single complication in these lines. But as I say, I hope you enjoyed this video. A really interesting game. Thank you to my opponent as well. He was a really good sport about the game, and it was really interesting hearing some of his thoughts after the game as well. But thank you for watching, guys, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.